He stood up, grabbed his throat, and the whole diner went quiet. Not a sound, not a word we could understand, just a man folding in on himself while rain punched our flickering neon like a fist. That's the moment my 7-year-old saved a stranger in a language I don't even speak. We were at the Blue Cactus on the edge of Pinecrest, New Mexico. Cracked vinyl, honest coffee pie that tastes better if you close your eyes on the second bite. I was the kind of tired that sits in your bones, 3 jobs and a smile that doesn't always make it to my eyes, when the city man in the corner pressed a hand to his chest, went gray and reached for a jacket pocket, like it was a lifeline slipping away. His sounds were thick English melting under fear, and I could hear please but not the rest. And there's a special kind of terror when someone begs you across a gap you can't cross. My daughter Lila slid off her stool, calm like a lake in wind fingers, in the inside pocket, before anyone else moved pill bottle out. Label read. 2 under your tongue, she told him soft, steady, counting to 8, in Arabic breathing with him, till color floated back into his face. He blinked and came home to himself and said, Shukran, Habibti, and Lila answered Afwan like it was the most normal thing in the world. He said his name was Karim. Later I learned the rest, that he runs Crescent Lex systems, that his driver watches doorways like a bodyguard who's seen too much. But right then he was just a man who had almost fallen off the edge and been caught by a first grader with a coloring book. He looked at Lila the way good teachers look at sparks. Then he looked at me with a different kind of respect. The kind people save for mothers who make something out of not enough. He said his company builds tools so people understand each other. Translation, cultural nuance, the space between words. And he said Lila did naturally what his teams spend millions trying to teach machines. I laughed once a little sharp, because I know what it costs to keep a light like hers alive in a town like ours. Folks have been underestimating me since I was 12 and bagging groceries with a split lip. Underestimating me when I showed up pregnant and kept showing up anyway. Underestimating me in court when my ex called me unfit and the judge had to decide which story to believe. So when a stranger with perfect cufflinks said he could fix things I wasn't asking him to fix, I bristled. We earn what we have, I told him, chin set, because I've learned to hold it like that. Karim didn't flinch. I know being underestimated, he said, voice low and real. I've had people mispronounce my name on purpose to make me small. I'm not offering pity. I'm offering partnership. Before I could answer, the bell jingled, and 2 suits walked in like they owned oxygen. The tall one smiled with his teeth, not his eyes. Evening, he told me without seeing me, then turned to Karim. Mr. Halim, funny running into you. Colin Rourke, Executive Acquisitions, Argus Logic. Our driver stiffened. I stepped between the suits and my kid because sometimes your body makes decisions, your mind signs later. Rourke let his gaze land on Lila on the pencil smudge on her hand. Cute kid. Must be a quick study. You don't have to say threat for me to hear it. Lila walked up to him with that wire walker calm, said, Your voice goes up when you bluff, and your friend by the door keeps checking the lot for backup. If you had real papers, you'd have served them already. Yeah, that happened. Rourke chuckled without humor, a sound like ice, and told me sometimes mothers who run from problems make things worse for their children. I told him to leave. Karim told him again. They didn't. Lila picked up the payphone, the one that still works when storms chew cell service, and spoke to someone in a language I didn't recognize, then another, then back to English. Mrs. Park, it's time. 10 minutes later, a woman slipped through our kitchen like she'd always known the hinges, small, unhurried eyes counting exits. Separate first, she said together, later. I wanted to argue. I wanted to grab my child and make the world smaller. But Lila squeezed my hand and whispered, "Amma, please trust me." We left in 3 vehicles, rain slashing the glass pine crest shrinking in the rear view like a set being struck between scenes. The safe house looked ordinary from the street stucco and an old wind chime, but a bookcase swung open to a room full of humming machines, and a man whose face I recognized from magazine covers back when genius was allowed to be public. "I'm Dr. Arjun Bose," he said, handing me tea like a neighbor, not a legend. "I used to build algorithms for language. Now I help protect the people corporations think they can own." He wasn't being dramatic. Screens lit up with maps and messages, red dots blooming like a rash, and Argus Logic filed emergency papers in a county courthouse at 10 p.m., calling me unfit, calling Kareem a trafficker, calling Crescent Lex a front. Money buys speed. Dr. Bose said that like gravity, and he was right. Because deputies scooped me up on a protective order that felt exactly like a kidnapping with a badge. "Lila," I said to the ceiling, and to whatever part of the universe listens to mothers. They said they'd lost track of her like she was a file, and not my heart, and I forgot how to swallow for a second. Then Dr. Bose slid me a printout because he didn't want to say it out loud. "The bridges are burning, but I am building new ones. Don't look where they expect, look where language began. My smallest diplomat." You know what I mean. When your kid speaks in code, and you understand anyway. There's a place north of Abiquiu where red rock holds petroglyphs, and the wind has a grammar where tribes met to trade and argue and name the same stars from different sides of the sky, and if language began anywhere, it began in the courage to listen. We killed the headlights a mile out and hiked the last stretch under a sky that felt like a cathedral without a roof. From the ridge, I saw lanterns in a bowl of stone, tiny galaxies on the ground. In the center, my daughter stood on a low rock that looked worn by ceremony, and around her not just pinecrest, but a crowd stitched from 100 threads. The grocery clerk, the mechanic who talks to engines, the librarian who makes French sound like a flute, strangers who knew Lila because she had listened to them and taught them and learned from them. Argus arrived like a migraine, black SUV's tactical gear on men who've never asked a second question. Rourke stepping into the light like he rented it by the hour. He mispronounced my kid's name on purpose, told her the court said she was coming with them, called the whole circle unlawful. Lila didn't yell. She said, "My name is Lila Park Alvarez Bose Martinez. I am the daughter of everyone who taught me and the student of everyone I helped. If you think you can arrest a community by grabbing one child, you haven't listened to anything I've said since I was 4. Then she slid into Spanish, then Arabic, then Lakota she learned behind the gas station, from a woman who sells sage, and the people around her answered, not echoing braiding. A boy signed while whispering code into a radio, a girl traced geometry in dust, and for one raw, honest beat, the security team froze because they had trained for bodies that resist, not voices that change the shape of a room. Rourke gestured anyway, because power doesn't know how to back down, and that's when floodlights from the ridge hit, and a woman's voice rolled over the stone, steady and official. Director Dana Reyes, Federal Corporate Crimes. Argus operatives stand down now. If you'd told me a month earlier the feds would tell men in expensive boots to put their hands behind their backs, while my second grader gave a speech about love, I would have poured your coffee and smiled. But there it was. Cameras blinked, red phones lit up like slot machines, and Director Reyes said a data packet had just landed in her office, the AGs and 9 newsrooms. 3 years of Argus emails, shell budgets, surveillance orders, custody petitions used like crowbars. And the world was watching. Rourke did the public dance people do when the rug gets yanked, but the room no longer believed him. and belief is what holds their kind up. Lila stepped off the stone and told him the part he could never buy. You wanted to study my brain, but what you can't copy doesn't live in my head. It lives in how I pay attention when people talk. You can't patent that you can't buy it. It's love. She raised her hand, and every child in that circle stood, and the sound they made went through me like water. 20 tongues, 2 hands spelling feet tapping a beat that made sense in the bones. Not unison, not chant something new that still felt like home. Agents moved. Argus backed away. The desert breathed. Dawn washed the rock pink, and Lila ran into my arms, and I told her she'd scared me half to death, and she said she had to be brave before she was ready, because sometimes that's the only way it works. And Kareem hugged us both like a man who once lost something at 12 and finally got it back. He laid out a plan that wasn't charity. Build with, not build for. Fund families, pay kids for age-appropriate work. Publish the playbook so no one can lock it up. Make it public and noisy and beloved, so the next Argus has to go through all of us just to lay a finger on one child. People nodded, a few argued, which is how I know it was real. And Director Reyes walked past with Rourke in cuffs while the sun remembered our names. Lila climbed back on the stone and said it wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. And she said it again in the languages of the people who had carried us, signed it for the boy from the trailer park. Clicked it out in the quick code the math girls use when the room gets too loud. And I stood there thinking about brake pads and rent and bleach, and the ways we make bridges out of small daily choices. I'm not going to tie the bow for you, because after the lights left and the desert went back to keeping secrets, the hard questions stayed open, and I want it open. How do you protect a child like mine without hiding her forever? How do you build a world where genius isn't a commodity and vulnerability isn't hunting season, where protection doesn't turn into control while you're not looking? Tell me what you think in the comments. Where's the line? What did we get right? What risks would you take? When were you misjudged for your accent or your job or your name? And what did justice look like up close? I'll be in there with you, answering with honesty and a slice of pie, because this bridge belongs to all of us now, and we decide who gets to cross.